Strangers from the internet are standing outside. The strangers from the internet have come from far and wide. But I cannot receive them. I hardly believe in them.
Welcome back to Shadow Yaddo. I'm Elena Richardson. On Sunday, we observed Mother's Day. Or maybe we didn't. I know not everyone is up for these hallmark moments, but I found myself thinking about both ends of the mom trail. Of my beautiful mother, who never met a plant she couldn't name or an animal she didn't care for. I swear, she once tried to give a goldfish that had jumped out of its bowl the kiss of life. My Granny Kate, with her glorious chestnut hair and lack of an edit button, and of my brilliant daughter, who recently moved back east and has inherited all of the good and very little of the bad from this matrilineal line. So this episode, we're celebrating family in all its joys and messiness, with a nod to the fact that Yaddo itself is often spoken about as a family, a chosen family of kindred souls. We've enlisted a few of these artists to talk to us about what family means to them. We'll hear from illustrator and writer Margaret Kimball, whose new book, And Now I Spill the Family Secrets, applies a detective-like rigor to the unraveling of a family. In the acknowledgments of her book, Margaret writes, "The best thing that happened at Yaddo is that I met Christian, the fiction writer whom I eventually, after much negotiation, married. And now, as you'll hear, they've some exciting news to share." Margaret will be in conversation with the wonderful novelist Charles Bock, author of Beautiful Children, which metabolizes his searing memories of his youth spent behind the counter of his parents' Las Vegas pawn shop into an incredible work of fiction. The New York Times had this to say about his work. One word, bravo. But first, we'll hear from someone we think will soon be a household name, Kirstin Valdez Quade. She's the author of Night at the Fiestas, a story collection that won a National Book Critics Circle Prize, as well as the 5 Under 35 Award from the National Book Foundation. Her debut novel, The 5 Wounds, was one of Oprah Magazine's most anticipated books of 2021. It came out in April and is garnering fantastic reviews. It begins with the sentence, "This year, Amedeo Padilla is Jesus." Amedeo and his family, we learn, live in the fictional village of Las Peñas in New Mexico, a region hard hit by poverty. Amedeo has been selected to play Jesus in a Good Friday procession. He's feverishly preparing for this role when his 15-year-old daughter, Angel, shows up pregnant on his doorstep. What follows is a year in the life of the Padillas as 5 generations of family converge.
This book really started with the relationships with the characters and these two characters coming together somewhat reluctantly. You know, there's Amedeo, who is a deadbeat father. He's unemployed, he's an alcoholic, and he has not taken much responsibility for the choices he's made in his life. And his daughter, who's been largely estranged from him, shows up unannounced and pregnant and tells him that she needs to move in with him and his mother. So that was really the seed of the story. Amedeo is faced with this challenge and this demand on his attention and love. I'm My family has a long history in New Mexico, centuries long. All of my extended family is there, and it's a place that I go back to, and it is the one place that is home to me. There's such disparity between wealth and poverty in that area, and it's incredibly painful. And that disparity has a long history. The history of New Mexico is of conquest. The Spanish colonized and took land from Pueblo Indians, and that pain is still really, really palpable today. New Mexico, like so many places in the country, is grappling with that history and with these narratives that have been passed down about the Spanish role in the region and the way that this pain gets reinflicted every single time one of these stories is retold. The Fiesta's annual celebration of the retaking of Santa Fe has just done away, I think 2 years ago, with one of the processions, the Entrada, which is about Don Diego de Vargas's allegedly peaceful retaking of Santa Fe. It wasn't peaceful. That retaking resulted in the massacre of 70 Pueblo men. Pueblo women and children were taken into slavery. I mean, it was incredibly brutal. There is just this long history of, military, economic, religious conquest, really. And all of those wounds are still felt today. There's a tradition in the region of penitentes, and the tradition is still alive today, although the numbers are much, much smaller. In the 19th century, when villages were really spread out and isolated, and not every village had a priest, these communities came together to fill those needs. And so, they were mutual aid societies, they buried the dead, and they were responsible for marking these important days in the liturgical calendar often. And Good Friday procession is a big part of that. Their worship involves physical penance. When I was doing research, I saw that there was an allusion to some rumors that there had been actual crucifixions. There are not documented cases of this. This is not a standard part of the tradition. But when I read that detail, I couldn't help wondering what kind of need and depth of belief and desire would be behind a choice like that. That was the beginning of Amedeo. When I started the story, I really judged Amedeo. I thought he was a bad person. I thought he deserved punishment for abandoning his child. And, in my very earliest draft, the story was about punishing him and, Amedeo getting his comeuppance. And it was not a successful draft because of it. That stance of judgment, I was coming in as the writer feeling superior to him and writing about him from afar and above. And that didn't work. It did not work for the story. Part of my journey as the writer and getting to know him was actually having to sit with the discomfort of getting very close to him and actually allowing myself to sink into his consciousness and to become him. I resisted that. It was uncomfortable, but I had to do that in order to let that character be fully human. For all of his flaws, what really makes me root for him is that he tries. From the very beginning, he's trying to change his life. I do think that process of writing about a character who I might otherwise be inclined to dismiss, that's, one of the challenges that draws me to the page. Writers often have obsessions, these themes that we return to again and again. One of my big obsessions is family. I love observing other families. I like thinking about my own family. I remember even as a kid, I loved going to friends' houses and just watching how they interacted with their parents and how their siblings interacted and I'm fascinated by family dynamics. And for grown children too, because all of the characters in my novel are their children and their parents. Each of them at some point reflects on these dual roles. And I'm really interested in how we navigate those roles as we grow up, how those dynamics stay with us, how they continue to shape our lives and shape the lives of the next generation. I'm obsessed with families. There's nothing more interesting.
When I think about family in these kind of contexts, I'm reminded of a Jane Austen quote when her heroine, Emma, declares, "It is very unfair to judge of anybody's conduct without an intimate knowledge of their situation. Nobody who has not been in the interior of a family can say what the difficulties of any individual of that family may be." What I like best about it is that Emma's totally wrong in her assessment. She's talking about Frank Churchill. But clearly she's right that we're shaped by our families and by the factors that motivate and hinder them. But back to Margaret Kimball. You might recognize her visual art from the hand-lettered logos, books, advertising, newspapers, magazines, murals, home decor, and wallpaper she's created. Her first book, And Now I Spill the Family Secrets, an illustrated memoir, is a riveting and layered account of motherhood, divorce, mental health, and coming to terms with family conflict while investigating long-held secrets. It's also a page-turner with immersive graphics, humor, and heart. We needed a very special fellow artist to dig into her new book and discuss it with Margaret. So we turned to her friend, someone from her Yaddo family. Here's the super empathetic, mega-talented Charles Bock in conversation with Margaret Kimball.
Want some whiskey in your water, sugar in your tea? What's all this crazy question they're asking me? This is the craziest party that could ever be. Don't turn on the lights, cause I don't want to see. Mama told me not to come. Mama told me not to come.
How old were you when you started writing this? And what was the original idea you had?
I was 19 when I wrote the first essay, I would say, that morphed into this. So like 12 years ago. The process, it really was like healing for me. When I started, I was so angry about, definitely at my mom, but like about how our family split apart. And so researching and really trying to like understand my mom's past especially, and like why my dad made the decisions he made, just gave me so much more empathy for them. And I would try to work on other things. And at one point, Christian, who you know, my husband, sat me down and he's like, you just have to finish your book. I was just obsessed with saying the story as clearly as I could to say like, here's what happened. My family didn't do that. What family does? Like, who sits down and is like, here's everything that's happened in the last, 30 years or whatever. I tried to put it down a million times, but I was too obsessed with it, so I just kept chipping away at it.
The book covers 3 eras. There's your childhood. We are introduced to your childhood through your mom's suicide attempt, which happens when you're 4. Is that right? Then you've got your preteen and teen years, where your dad remarries and Janice enters the picture and you live with them.
Yep.
And your mom has at least one more attempt at suicide and definitely more hospitalization. And then like the last third of the book is more adult. So this is a massive family history. Deal with your grandparents and their depression. Is there a great grandma who has depression too? Do I have that right?
Yeah, she wasn't diagnosed, but my mom grew up with her and, assesses it as she was probably clinically depressed.
There's no way you could have known you were taking all this on. What discoveries were there that as they came to light, you were like, Kirstin, you won't effing believe this?
Now I have to think. So one thing, when I was looking up all these hospitals like my mom and grandma had stayed in, a lot of them are defunct. And, made me think, how are we taking care of our vulnerable populations? Like, they're shitholes to begin with. So they're just so depressing. And you're like, how could anyone get well in a place like this? Like, a lot of them, not all of them. But I remember visiting my mom in a few places and just being like, oh my God, it's like prison. Nobody puts money into them, so they fall apart. It just made me kind of angry at society for not trying to help vulnerable populations more. I feel like a lot of these stories were kind of always in the background. This whole kidnapping with my mom, I feel like I still need to know more about it. I don't exactly understand, but at some point her father just took her to Canada for a few years. I think she was 2 or 3 years old. It's like, that must be traumatizing. Sometimes she says a few years and then sometimes she's like, well, I don't know how long it was. And I'm like, where can I get more information about that? I think there's some crazy things like that, but I just don't think anyone's ever going to give me a straight answer. And she probably doesn't know.
Right, because you don't remember anything when you're 3,
Right.
Like, it's not like she has a firm understanding of a timeline. Talk about the decision or how you end up using photographs. This book has your drawings and your recreations of so many family photos, snapshots. It seems like pictures of homes, of wall tapestries, of deck chairs, 80s phones, layouts of apartments in towns, bedroom quilts. It's just a huge amount of everyday stuff of life. It's not still life anymore. It's your drawing. It's your art. How did you figure out to do that?
I was originally just drawing random objects. There were a few rooms, but it was, here's the cup I drank out of or whatever. And they were sort of disconnected. And then at some point I was like, I really want the pages to be environments. Like, I wanted as much as possible to get the reader to kind of like walk into the space I used to live in. And so I started drawing the rooms as I remembered them and pieced together from photographs. And then I realized I didn't have any people. I don't love drawing people. Like, when I think about a memory, I think about the place I was in. Like, I don't really see people's faces. Like, I might see a flash of like my mom's hair or like the jacket she was wearing or something, but like I don't clearly see her face. I just had all these old photographs and videos and stuff, and so I put them in. But it's also like, what do you do with all this crap? As life goes on, it's like my parents just keep giving me stuff, photo albums and videos, and I'm like, where does this all go?
Did they give you this stuff because they knew you were working on the book, or did they give you stuff because the storage room is full? Margie, here.
The storage room is full. So like, they originally were not giving me anything. They didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want me to know anything. And they were like, piss off. But then, my dad moved. He wanted to get rid of a bunch of stuff, so he'll just send me a box of stuff once in a while. And my mom, same thing, moved, sent me all these photographs. And I'm like, well, I could have used these 5 years ago, but thanks. But I have a question for you. Sometimes I feel like the pages are too crazy. Do you feel like they're hard to read?
I don't think it's hard to read. I think that this is a book that is not a casual read. You know what? It's intense. Every chapter, there's some emotional 18-wheeler that's going to smack into you. That's how it is. And that there's an electricity on every page. And it is visually immersive, considering that the drawings are, so much of it is every day, but the experience is so far from every day. Life is hard and weird, and the everyday is intense and insane sometimes. Every family is insane, and every family is extraordinary, and this is like a deep dive into that. I read this and I became very concerned. Like, I would imagine my future and my mental state and my ability to take care of my family and whether or not I have deep problems. Which, let's just be honest, like, the answer is yes. Like, but
for everyone.
But I think that's for everyone. I think that that's kind of the beauty of this, is that it shows how tenuous our grasp is on being able to just get through. However angry you've been at your mother, I came away with huge amounts of empathy for her. I feel like she was overmatched. I wish that there was somehow a different kind of support system for her to have a chance to find out who she could have been.
I'm amazed that she mothered me the way she did with her own mom being locked up, you know, for much of her childhood. But my mom was essentially raised by her grandparents, and I feel like I knew my grandma, so I knew she just really wasn't all there. When you grow up like that, and with your dad kidnapping you once in a while, you know, it's just like... And so, yeah, I have a ton of empathy for her, too, and I'm impressed that she's, like, as kind and generous as she is with the upbringing she had.
Have you guys worked through? Do you feel you have a good relationship with her?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely better. So I'm a stepmom now, and I haven't announced, but I'm pregnant, so I'm going to be a mom.
Oh, my God. Oh, sweetheart.
I know, isn't that exciting?
That's beautiful. Congratulations.
So, thank you.
And to Christian. That's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. I'm super excited. He's it's a boy, and he's due in August. But I think, like, all of that has made me a lot more empathetic, because being a parent, I mean, as you know, is just an impossible situation much of the time. And so that's helped make me, like, a kinder person. Like, we have different personalities, my mom and me, so, like, we're always going to be a bit different. And I think I'm just, like, much too weird for most of my family, and that's always going to be true. But we can, like, get together and have a great time, and I can talk to her about things. And, you know, I called her a few days ago talking to her about the pregnancy stuff, and so, like, that's great. So we can talk about that pretty easily. So I think it's good. Yeah, I think we have a good relationship now.
Oh, good. Now, 2/3 of the way through the book, it does turn into kind of your adult life. And then your brother Ted has inherited some of these illnesses. What was it like to figure out that you had to put that in the book?
So I sold the book. I think I had a scene or two in there, but I was not willing to even think about it. Christian was like, I think maybe examine this a little bit. And then my editor was like, this is a generational story, so you have to think about this in a deeper way. And I just was open with my brother about it by interviewing him and just asking him questions and trying to understand what he was telling me. Be almost like more of a journalist than a memoirist. In the first 2/3 of the book, I have a ton of opinions, and I try to, like, you know, back away from them and present all sides. I feel pretty strongly about some of the things that happened, but with my brother, I don't feel like I can feel strongly about what he's saying, because he's my brother, and, like, I love him and I have to support him.
Well, you have that beautiful passage where you talk about the three options. Pop his bubble, you know, where say that's not true. What you come up with is he's your brother and you love him, and you know, and that you're not going to blow up that relationship.
We just went through so much together, and I was so close to him. Like, he was just my best friend for so long. Yeah, I just don't see how I could categorize him in one way or just kind of write him off in one way. So yeah, it was important to kind of step back from that as much as I could. You know, and I don't know what it means for him, but it felt important to put it there.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's the right thing, because it's just so profound and it's heartbreaking. It's just so deeply heartbreaking.
Like, no one is talking about it that way. And so I feel like we're just all kind of like, what is this? You know, I'll bring it up and just be like, hey, like, he said this or whatever. And it's like, oh, you know, that's fine, whatever. I mean, you probably hear it in my voice, but I just, like, feel bad making any sort of connection, or, you know, I just feel bad for him. I'm like, how can you live like this with all this stress all the time? It's just hard for me to make that connection too, because I just don't want to, like, pigeonhole him or something like that.
Right. And who knows, maybe things will change. Maybe not, but maybe someone will enter his life and be a release valve for all that pressure that he feels inside his head. In the book, it says your dad didn't read it. Your mom kind of has stayed away from it. Has that changed at all?
Well, my dad still hasn't read it. He said he pre-ordered a copy recently, and I was like, you know, I would have given you one. But he felt like that was his big supportive moment, I think. So he's going to read it, he says, which at this point I'm like, I don't really know if you should bother, but okay.
He's going to be up all night that first night. You know, he loves you more than anything, and this is your family story. So that's Dad.
Yeah, my mom has just called a few times to tell me she doesn't really approve of the book being published, and I'm like, well, cat's out of the bag. Like, we've already gone through this. It's, like, out of my control. You know, we just haven't talked about it. I think when it comes out and she, like, actually has it, because I haven't shown them the illustrated So they've only seen the text version. I just printed out, copies of the text.
Oh, I mean, it's going to blow them away to look at their living rooms, to look at their...
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to blow them away. And then your rendering of it all. It's going to blow their fucking minds.
Well, I just hope they keep talking to me, so we'll see.
They will probably respond well to the fact that the world is going to embrace this book.
That's nice of you. So I called my dad, but I was like, it's gotten starred reviews and blah, blah. And so I'm like going on about it. And he's just quietly listening, and 5 minutes passes in which I'm just praising myself. And he's like, so what's a starred review? And I was just like, right.
Thanks for tuning in. Big thanks to our producer, Kirstin Valdez, our sound engineer, CJ DeGenero, and to the artists who contributed music. In order of appearance, they are Joseph Keckler for the adaptation of our theme music, Strangers from the Internet, Peter Gabriel for Of These, Hope, from Passion, music for The Last Temptation of Christ, Sister Sledge for We Are Family, and Three Dog Night for Mama Told Me. We'll see you for more Shadow Yaddo in just a couple of weeks. In the meantime, I hope you're finding a reason to celebrate, maybe with your family of choice. Oh, and how could I forget? Huge congrats to Margaret Kimball and Christian Moody. We can't wait to meet this new Yaddo baby.